In the last video, I shaped 3 pieces of metal to fit the hammer form that Jere Kirkpatrick made. This time I'm going to finish off the odd shape. So Jere shipped me the part that he made, and this is a magnificent piece of work. It's amazing that this complicated shape could be made from one piece of metal, but Jere pulled it off beautifully. My approach was to make it from 3 different pieces of metal, and that was challenging enough, but I did pull it off. So today we're going to join my 3 parts together, finish the welds, and then join it to Jere's part. So I'll be using the hammer form to hold the parts in proper alignment. And I'll use a spring clamp to hold this part tight against the hammer form. And this small part will be held in place with a small screw. So the parts are fitting together pretty well. I can only put tack welds where the metal hangs over the buck. So I've got about 3/4 of an inch on both sides where the tack welds will go. So I'll use vice grip clamps to hold the metal together tightly on both ends. And I'll do just a little bit of tapping to get the best alignment I can. Looks like I have an excellent fit up there. So now I can put a small tack weld on both ends. Okay, I'll flip this around now and tack weld the other side into place. So now I can pull these parts off the hammer form and finish tack welding these joints. I have a nice tight fit up with closely spaced tacks, and now I'm ready to finish weld these joints. Now I'll flip this over and make a fusion pass on the inside. Fusion welding ensures that I have 100% penetration, and it smooths the weld, giving it a lower profile on the inside. I put the part back on the hammer form to check the fit, and it's fitting very well. So I'm going to clamp it tight against the hammer form, and then I'm going to scribe all the edges in preparation for trimming. So now I can trim these edges. So I'll leave a little extra tab at the ends of these joints and cut that off after it's welded. I've trimmed the edges on both parts and tested them against a flat surface, and you can see that they fit with no gap whatsoever, so they're just about ready to join together. I decided to fill the miscellaneous holes I put in this part. Now I'm going to dress these welds before I tack the parts together. But let me give you a preview of the fit up we have. You can see there's a nice tight fit up, so we're just about ready to clamp each end and start putting tack welds on the joints. I'll start cutting the weld down with 50 grit sandpaper. Now I'll use 120 grit paper to get the 50 grit scratches out. That should be good for now. I'll give this part the final finish once I've made the final weld and dressed it down. I have both parts clamped together, and I'm ready to start the tack welding. So that's the kind of a fit up I like. It's nice and tight from one end to the other. I'm going to work all of these joints with a hammer and dolly before I finish weld these seams. So I'll be working against a T-dolly, and you can see that these little barbs are getting in the way, so I'm going to trim them off now. I have nice solid tack welds on all of the ends, so these little tabs have filled their purpose. So let's get those trimmed off. And now I can work these joints against the T-dolly. That feels very good. So I'll test everything with my finger to make sure it's flush everywhere. What I'm trying to avoid here is that if one side is higher than the other, after I weld it, when I sand the weld down flush, let's say one side is sticking up above the other 10/1000ths of an inch, well, when I sand it flat, I'll lose 10/1000ths of an inch thickness on the high side. And this metal is down to 30/1000ths of an inch in some areas. So if it goes from 30/1000ths to 20/1000ths, that's perilously thin. So that's why it's essential to get the best fit up I can on these joints before I do the finish welding. Okay, so the first side is done. I'll flip this over and do the other side. So the welding on the outside is completed. I'm going to make a fusion weld on the inside of these joints. I put the shortest back cap on my TIG torch to make it easier to get inside this shape. That's about as far as I can go on this side. I'll flip this around. And I'll weld the last segment. That was pretty tricky, but I got it done. I'll flip this up so you can take a look at the inside. So we're into the home stretch now. I'll shave the weld down flush using 50 grit abrasive. So the weld is trimmed down flush. Now we'll switch to 120 grit abrasive and get these coarse sanding scratches out. Now we'll use a sanding block with 120 grit to flatten this out completely. So I'll do some more sanding on this to give it the final finish. But look at how beautifully those contours have smoothed out. And of course I have to finish the weld on the inside, and I need to smooth off these two openings as well. So that'll be the last step. To get the final finish on this, I block sanded it up to 240 grit paper. And then to blend everything together, I used a green Scotch-Brite pad. So after many hours of work and much careful forming, the odd shape is finished. And I'm very, very happy with how this came out. So the next step for me is to finish off the other side and ship that up to Jere, and we'll see how he finishes his part. I know he plans to gas weld the seam, whereas I TIG welded mine, and knowing Jere, he'll find some other ways to make it different too. That's just the way he is. So thank you for watching this from start to finish, and I'll see you next time. If you enjoy my videos, please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when I post a new project. If you like, you can support these videos through Patreon. Just click the link at the end of the video. I'll see you next time.